how did this come about? I'm going to show you a tool that I've been working on for about 5 or 6 years. It's still in a stage where you're going to say, I can't believe you've been working on this for 5 or 6 years. I spend 90% of my time doing something else, but the reason I developed this, I found myself repeating the same terms and acronyms over and over, like all the D's, right? Let me actually back up a hair. So by title, I'm usually called an enterprise agile coach, but what I actually do is a little bit harder to describe. Generally, I bring somewhere over 100 years of science to the management of software economics, like why you might be working really hard and not producing anything of value, or why you might be making a lot of money in your career but be completely miserable in your job. I've done work for Humana. We won a 2024 Devies Award for some DevOps work that we did. Walt Disney Parks, actually Walt Disney Attractions Technology, which to be clear is not Imagineering. I am not an Imagineer. But I did launch the platform agnostic cloud data lake that their Star Wars Galaxy's Edge land and their Galactic Star Cruiser immersive resort experience are based on. If you're kind of a Star Wars nerd, this is what the walls look like inside the building there at Attractions Technology. Kind of neat. I think that this will get you to the tool if you want to download this and use it yourself. As I said, I found myself working with several different companies and running into the same conversations over and over again, using the same sort of acronyms over and over again. A lot of what I do, as I said, is teaching people management as a science. This is where I spend 90% of my time. You can really explain it by these 3 pictures. We don't have time to improve things that matter because we have to work really hard pulling these square wheels through the mud. So instead of changing what actually makes a difference, we're going to worship effort instead. And we're going to reward people for working extra hours and being miserable. The elephant walk, we can't change this because our customers expect that. And we can't change our customers' expectations because of our release dates. And we can't change our release dates because of our DevOps technology. And we can't change our DevOps technology because of our team in India. And we can't change our, everything is the way it is because everything is the way it is. How do you break out of that loop? And then the stack of ladders picture. Every team that I've ever talked to, usually the last question that I'll ask when I get introduced to them is, if I had a magic wand, what would you want? What would you ask for? Every single team that I've ever talked to, with the exception of one team, has said, we need more people. Most software organizations that I have visited, I can't make claims about the larger population, only the ones that I've seen, they're standing on a stack of developers. The developers feel that. They have the resources. They're not using the resources in the right way. Another thing I do a lot is explain to people you cannot simply be more efficient. I can define for you 8 different types of efficiency at a minimum, and some of those are forced trade-offs to each other. So if you're more efficient in one manner, you're less efficient in another. You can't simply be more efficient. As I said, software economics, why project plans, 2 years in advance might lose 80% or more of the economic value that they could deliver, what information versus value remaining looks like with delay over time, how multitasking is killing you, how multitasking is killing you actually measured in dollars. things like that. So as I said, I was repeating a lot of the same terms, all the D's that you know of. You know, we can play D, Mad Libs, right? Test-driven development, acceptance test-driven development, behavior-driven development, resume-driven development, sticker-driven development. Call now, get these free bonus Ds, trunk-based development, domain-driven design. What I found is that I started asking myself, can all of success be boiled down to maybe 10 or a dozen points? And is everything in that one tiny list, right? And as I was mentioning them, people, I'd remember 4 out of 6, you know, off the top of my head, and I'd forget a couple, and I'd come back to them. So I started making a list for myself. I said, I'm going to just write down what are the fundamental things that I'm always recommended, that I'm always teaching. And then it started growing. And I had a conversation with a brilliant DevOps engineer, and we both kind of found ourselves saying, this organization is essentially creating software in 2004. It's as if the past 20 years of software practices just have not happened for them. It reminds me very much of the Mark Twain quote where he says, a man who doesn't read has no advantage over the man who can't read, right? If there are software practices that you can do and they're free, the only thing they take is the behavioral decision to actually do them, and we're not using those, then we are stuck in time. I've worked in organizations that may still be stuck in 1984, 1998, 2004, 2011, something like that. So I started creating this timeline. I know you're looking at this and you're saying, what is this text for ants? You're not going to be able to read this easily. It's fine. We're going to dive into it. I started creating this timeline, added things to it, removed things, reordered it. I realized I wasn't after tools and technologies. I was after practices, not things that you have to buy for the most part, not specific technology packages with a name on them. I wanted behaviors, things you can do, things with almost no cost. As it took shape, I started to add these things in. So I will walk through this one with a little bit of zoominess here. That's too much zoominess. So to give you a rough idea, I've got year over here. I will address objections in advance about some of these things. I already know what you're going to say. We have the year, and then we have the practice itself. We've got to give it a name, and then we just put, are we doing it or are we not doing it? It's mostly a binary thing. We'll just put a 1 or a 0. Now, in some cases, somebody will say, well, we're, I don't know, like put in a 0.7 for that. We're sort of doing it. That's fine. It's not that much of a science. I came up with an impact score. This will be one of your objections. I spent a lot of time thinking about how these are not equal, although they are foundational things. So it's very difficult to look at them and say which one of these is less important than the other. The impact scores that I came up with, I spent a lot of time arguing with ChatGPT back and forth. I talked to developers, DevOps architects, managers that I knew, even authors in the code industry, books to come up with the impact scores that I do. They're roughly normally distributed, right? So if you see something and you think that's too high or that's too low, believe me, I agonized over, I think this is more important than a 6, but if I can't just make everything a 10, right? So they're roughly normally distributed. The practice, the why would you want to do it, right? The what is just the basic criteria, what defines what it is. Why am I not scrolling? Here we go. The why is why you would do it. What do you get out of it? What's the benefit? Then prerequisites. I realized for some of these, you really need to do one of the earlier practices first before you pick up this one. Then I looked into area. These could be different people that might be managers of different departments. They could just be different areas of thought. You may have a group that's small enough that you don't have a person representing each of these. But it's good to know which of these something is mainly aligned with. They're color-coded in that way. Got DevOps, development, QA, process, and product. Could there be more? Absolutely. Then I started counting the number of alignments. So if you want to start focusing on a plan to make change, you might want to start with the things that have the fewest areas of alignment so you don't have to get a committee together. Started counting the prereqs. So how many prerequisites do you need before you get to a specific technique? All right, so I'm going to back up. Not that far back. Ran into an interesting situation where in the what, I was having to explain to people in some cases what hexagonal architecture is, what behavior-driven development is. Managers, CTOs, CIOs, developers, in some places you will find very insular cultures where people do not go to conferences. They don't listen to industry podcasts. They don't watch YouTube videos where people argue back and forth about whether test-driven development is a good idea or not, right? There are some people that have tenures of 20, 30, 40 years writing code in the same place without changing much of their practice. So as I would go through one of the definitions, someone would say, oh yeah, we do test-driven development. And another developer would say, no. This is not what test-driven development looks like. I've done test-driven development and this is not it. Yes, we test things, but we're not doing TDD here. So I can't expand these. I've got the rows all locked to the same size right now, but the audit questions are to sort of sort those things out. Some of them are really relatively straightforward. I don't have deeper audit questions for everything, but it gives you a few things to help you kind of pin down what each thing actually means if you need to define it and be sure we're kind of all on the same definition. Another later addition, anti-patterns. So these are either what it looks like if you're not practicing it. I can usually tell what kind of pains you're experiencing if I know the answer to 2 or 3 of your questions on this. All right, so impact I covered, alignment, prerequisite count, audit details. Okay, so some objections. Practice X is in the wrong year. Yeah, probably. You're not going to like some of the years. One of the problems that I ran into, why are you doing that? You're supposed to be, no. This guy. There we go. It's a model, right? This was not meant to be a wiki of everything that's ever happened in the software industry since the first punch card. It's meant to be as small as possible while also being as comprehensive as possible. I didn't have time to build it to scale. One of the examples for problems with years, take something relatively straightforward like Scrum. Takeuchi and Nonaka published in '86. It was presented at UPSLA in '95. It had been discussed and used in Usenet groups for years in between there. The first Scrum guide didn't come out till 2010. Sutherland's book was 2014. A Scrum book with the Scrum patterns in it didn't come out till 2019. So what do you put on that for a year, right? You have to pick something. And in some cases, I chose from the eligible years so that certain things would fall into a sequence, because while they might overlap, this thing A might influence B, which kind of led to C. So I kind of stacked some years in that way. Some arbitrary decisions about how to get dates. Okay, why didn't you include, what are you doing? Okay, that's fine. Why did you not include XYZ? As I said, it's not a wiki of everything. Doing practice X is stupid. Okay, fine. This is not a test. There's no implication that you have to do every one of these things. I don't quote Donald Rumsfeld very often, but you do go to battle with the army you have right now. So whatever your development team, your development organization is doing, that is your starting place. This gives you a way to measure or audit what those things are that you're doing, what things you're not doing, and then look to see, is there value in expanding some of these things? If you ship boxed software on a CD-ROM, blue-green deployment production environments probably are not going to be very useful to you, right? So you have to apply some knowledge to this once you just identify the things that you're not doing. As I said, it's not a test. There's no pass or fail. No one's going to like take 10 points from Gryffindor. There's no consequences for scoring low on it. Ultimately, it's a tool for you to use to think about what to move forward with. Unfortunately, I've had a recent experience where someone told me that our CEO, relatively small company, asked me to figure out, where are we? Like, are we behind? Are we doing all the things we should do? He's like, this is amazing because this is exactly what I've been asked to do. And I said, great. So we sat down, filled this thing out together. He went and talked to the CEO and talked to the development manager, who just basically went through one by one and said, yeah, we can't do this because of we can't do this because of we can't do this because of Whatever the thorn in your organization's paw is that's preventing them from doing one of these things, it's probably still going to be there when you bring this up. If they've never heard of it, it's scary. If they have heard of it and chose not to do it, there's probably a reason for it. It takes an extraordinary amount of confidence in empirical data across the industry, knowing from thousands of software organizations what definitely works, what definitely does not work. And it takes the patience of Job and a stubbornness that would grind mountains down to sand to continue to use this within your organization to try to move things forward. Back to objections, I disagree with your definition of X. Great, please help me rewrite this. This is about 544 individual points of information. Took a lot of time to research this. I go back now and I look at some of the definitions and I feel embarrassed and I rewrite them. So as I go through it, I do update things. As I get feedback from people, I do update things. I have a list of things that are not included and specific reasons why they're not included. But I love feedback. The thing that I would love the most is if you can go and apply this in your organization and send it back to me. And it'd be amazing if you could give me a little description of what your organization's like, how many teams there are, your budget, your industry. Are you selling software or are you selling brooms, but you have to write internal software for tools that you use within your company, things like that. One of the objections, you don't have anything significant after the year 2021. Yes, that is correct. The reason for that, and specifically when people ask about AI and ML, I've got code assist tools in 2021 already. Again, the years aren't necessarily perfect. If you're using SonarLint, SonarCube, Coverity, checkmarks, anything like that, the general pattern is the robot is telling you how to improve your code in some way, right? So using Claude, GitHub Copilot is not distinctly different than that in my mind right now. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it might change my mind. It might be worth its own thing. But I think it's still the robot telling you how to improve your code. Some other new additions. I included some graphs to show you what your full potential of practices is. That would be the light blue in the background. If you're doing every practice from every year, that's where you would be. Some of these are offsetting, so it's unlikely you would be doing every practice anyway. The dark blue in the foreground shows you where you're actually at. Now, this is just an example from one team out of 11 teams. I just picked the one that sort of scored in the middle. The red is very similar. It's the impact score, so it's the number of practices per year times the impact score of those things. It's not that distinctly different, but it's interesting. This data can be extended. This is an aggregate result from 11 different teams within an organization. You can look at it as separate information like this. This will show you kind of the individual scoring of each of the teams. You can just take an average measurement and look at it as one thing like that. You can combine this with other data. This graph is an example of 4 dimensions of information. We've got software practices on the x-axis, agile maturity on the y-axis. That's a whole other instrument that I've got. That's a whole other talk. The size of the bubble is the sub-score about Scrum things within the agile maturity, and the color is cycle time. So green are teams that have super low, awesome cycle times. Red are teams that have really high cycle times. So you can expand the data in that way. Let's see here. Another piece about why I didn't include, another piece about why I made the graphs. I started running into an interesting pattern where a lot of organizations have kind of DevOps heavy items that they've checked towards the end. I think of this as sort of sticker-driven development. DevOps went through a weird phase of sort of semantic diffusion. It was a philosophy, really. Then it started to be referred to as a technology or a practice, and all of these people said, I'm not a DevOps guy, that's not a thing. Don't call me a DevOps engineer. And then they said, okay, well, if I don't put that on my resume, nobody knows how to find me, so I guess I'm a DevOps guy now. So, the term DevOps has gone through some weird things there. It is something you can buy, it's something you can spend money on, and you can put a Terraform sticker on your laptop. If you're still releasing code every 6 months or releasing code quarterly, why did you bother with infrastructure as code, containers, blue-green environments? That's not DevOps, that's DevOps cosplay. Okay. Let's see here. Some observations from real teams. I have been alarmed at the power curve of how different teams can be, which made me, something new just occurred to me today. I've suspected for a long time we're really over-focusing on what we're paying developers. We worry way too much about that. I'm now convinced right now it's an absurd thing to focus on. The difference in profit margins of software versus any other kind of physical good or physical service that you have to provide to people are absurd. And the difference between performance of individual developers, performance of teams, are measured in factors. Teams are 2x, 4x, 8x. I've seen teams in 4 months increase their throughput by 1,600%. 1,600% over their long-term 2-year average, right? When you can increase your throughput by 1,600% and quadruple the number of customers that you're serving, you're going to argue about $10,000, give or take, for your database guy? Who cares? Absolutely not worth worrying about when the difference in the best development compared to mediocre development can be measured in orders of magnitude. Right? I've been stunned by, as I said earlier, CTOs, CIOs, senior developers who I have to explain what branch by abstraction is to them. Right? I'm not talking about cases where people say, oh yeah, man, I've done TDD before. I've done mobbing. I'd love to get some guys mobbing here, get us doing TDD, but haven't really convinced anybody. That's fine. You know what you're talking about. You've made decisions or you've tried to do some things. In some orgs, the stunning lack of curiosity about your own industry is a bit alarming to me. I've been, let's see here, what else? I'm not going to go into that. I will come back to that if I have time. Yeah. I don't want to burn the house down. Future plans. So some cells, a very few number of cells, have little red ticks for notes that have citations. Again, it's going to be more than 544 pieces of information to add to this because many of these things have multiple citations. But I'd love for every cell to have a red note that tells you this was from the work of Dave Parnas in 1977, things like that. Other future plans, I can't remember. That's what I've got off the top of my head. I'd like to really have the citations in there for there. So let's assume that we've done this within our software organization. We have a good sense of where we're at, and we've decided there's certain things we don't care about. We don't need a blue-green production environment, right? So how would we use this? One of the easiest things you could do is go over here and say, let's look for things that don't require, Chuck is going to complain about everything, and he's not going to want to go along for the good of everybody. So let's filter this just for things that need one or two pieces of alignment. You could make it one even if you want. We don't want to do things that require chains of prerequisites that may take a long time to get to. Let's just look at things with one or two prerequisites. So we've narrowed that down. Things that are bold and blue in here are things that are essentially free. I mean, you might have to do some training. You might have to have Bob talk to Jane and let Jane teach Bob something. We can filter by color and get things that are just free. And so now we can look over here and say, what are we not doing? Or what are we maybe doing just a tiny bit of? And then we can say test-driven development. Everybody read the Agile Manifesto 10 years ago when they took the class, but nobody could cite any of the values or principles. Refactoring to patterns, behavior-driven development. These are things that are low alignment, low prerequisite, essentially free, have large impacts. These are things that you could do that within 2 weeks could substantially change the throughput and the value of your organization. Another recent addition, if you come over here and you find, say, something that you want to do and it has a prerequisite, you can click on trace and it will take you to the things in there that it refers back to. You can clear that. You can trace all if you want to see 4th of July. I don't know how useful this is, but you can see everything if you want to. And you can, can't remember which one was like my perfect example, but you can trace chain and it will show you links to those predecessors and then links from those to their predecessors. So you can see what's everything that we would want to do if we want to kind of work our way towards a more modern practice. If anybody downloads and uses this and sends it back to me, I'd be tickled pink. That would make me really happy. Apply this in organizations where you work if you can. Sometimes just the knowledge of what's on the menu, what's available, is really helpful. And a lot of the people that I've run into, they could be first-year developers, they could be 20-year CTOs, they could be experts in certain things and not in others, but very few of them know a comprehensive scale of all of the things that they could be doing and therefore have the ability to choose what kind of things they want to add to their menu and pursue. I think that is everything that I wanted to say without setting fire to the industry. Anybody have questions? Hang tight. One other thing I was going to say. There is one other future plan here. There's another scale outside of this that is paradigms or mental models, right? These things go back to, I think the earliest one that's really relevant is like 1912, but then there's some from just after World War II. There's some things from the 80s, the 90s. Those influence how people in software organizations think about things, and because of that influence, they will choose what practices they do and don't want to practice, right? So I do want to return to this and figure out a way to factor in the larger paradigms that influence how people think about software and technology and the economic value that it creates, and then have that integrated with where these practices are. Because you really have to get out of your 1912 Taylorist paradigm and into at least post-World War II Deming paradigm before some of these things are going to make sense, because some are super counterintuitive. Okay.
Yes, sir. So I have a doubt on the test-driven development. You said it has a high impact, but since it's not, it's the low priority for every developer, so we start, developing the feature first and going ahead, pushing, and we want to know when it fails. So I think the test-driven development, it has a high impact, but even though, it is having a high impact, most of the developers neglect it at the first glance, when they talk about the feature. And yesterday I happened to notice like one of the talks, debugging with the LLMs, they mentioned about the having unit testing with LLMs. So, ask LLMs to, write unit testing for your code so that it helps, coverage your test cases. So I was thinking like, is it something that LLMs should do it, or is it something as a developer should do it going ahead? Because as a developer, if I do it, I start thinking in a ways in future to optimize my code. Or is it something I start developing more focus on feature and LLMs can take care of, trying to cover the testing?
Yeah, fantastic set of questions. That is literally the two things that I am the most focused on right now, thinking about, writing about, researching. There are a handful of these practices that I would say, if you're not doing this, you're lighting pallets of money on fire, and you should be taken out in the street and shot like a dog. Test-driven development is one of those. When I get arguments from people that say, test-driven development's not all that great, it costs all this upfront, blah, 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 those people never know what they're talking about. They do not know what test-driven development is. They think it means having test coverage. They think it means you have to think about every single potential edge case up front and define all of those. It's not what test-driven development is. Test-driven development is it's probably the biggest amplifier in here that doesn't involve multiple people being involved to do it. One of the most common objections to test-driven development is, well, we've had this hole in our boat for 40 years. It's just bringing in water. We've never had a test harness before. We've never had any unit tests before. So we just might as well not ever fix that hole in our boat now. Well, that's stupid, right? The first thing you should do if you have a hole in your boat is stop bailing water, fix the hole in your boat, then go back to bailing water, then worry about your balance between bailing and making forward progress with the boat, right? I think that LLMs or AI or whatever you want to call it are going to play an enormous role. I think they have the potential to play an enormous role where you have code bases that go back to 1984 in some little areas. You have monoliths or microliths. You have spaghetti architecture. You have mountains of recorded manual testing that you can't run until you have an executable. So by then it doesn't matter. Like the bug's already in there. It's too late to find out, right? The whole point of TDD is to move quality to the left so far that you actually put it before writing the code, right? You do quality first, then you write the code. I think LLMs can give people the opportunity to understand their legacy code that has no documentation. Crawl through this and tell me what's happening in here, right? Because the guy that wrote this in Fortran, he died, right? We don't have the punch cards. We lost the punch cards, so tell me what all of this legacy code is doing. That is going to help with TDD. It's going to give people the ability to retro TDD. So here's all this stuff we already have that doesn't have unit tests. We want to know immediately while I'm in the IDE, while I'm making a commit, while I'm collapsing my branch to trunk, I want to know if I've broken the build right then, not 2 weeks from now when the QA team runs all of their recorded scripts, right? And we can cover that in 20-year-old legacy bases. I'm guessing in like 6 months or a year or something like that, you can retrofit tests to that. If you spend 25% of your team's effort on that, I think it's going to pay off like 500%. You know, I mean, I'm just making those numbers up, but it's I think one of the places where it's going to be the most useful. And once you get in that habit, it's going to help you or help teams that aren't doing TDD to start writing their first tests. Let GitHub Copilot or Claude write your first test for you. Make sure that it fails. Then ask yourself, what's the minimum amount of code I have to write to make this test green? Refactor, repeat. Do that over and over again. Developers will get to the point where you know, all the Fortran and COBOL guys got angry because compilers were taking their job. You know, now the code is just going to get compiled automatically. Well, we're just doing that same thing now, right? Developers will be able to think about, maybe I've got a little time to meet a customer and talk to them face to face. Maybe I've got time to talk to my product owner and say, let me give you 3 different options or 5 different options of how we could create that thing, right? Not barely delivering one thing the day before the demo, but letting the robot do most of the work for you. TDD pays for itself in terms of time, in orders of magnitude. So yes, does that sort of answer your question? Okay. Okay. My clock tells me I have 7 minutes and 10 seconds. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can go back to the doohickey if I need to. Yeah, the multitasking, by the way, that's another one of my jukebox hits. Like, if you want me to visit you and do a diatribe about multitasking, it's literally costing you thousands of dollars to have your team working on multiple things. Let's back up to here. I think that will get you to the tool. Any other questions in my supposed 6 minutes? I came in way under so I could answer questions.
I am a photographer. I am a solopreneur. I am also a crazy person because I have all these ideas about what I want to do. To me, that's allowed, ChatGPT is my source, although it's like driving me crazy lately. And so I can get on there and I can go write a code, a Pine script to help me day trade. And then I can go write a code to help me do a better marketing strategy, like some kind of like PowerPoint thing. And so I have these different levels of code, but also I'm trying to grow and like create other events and make community and that kind of thing. So from your perspective, one reason why I came is because I want to see like what big stuff is doing.
Sure.
What's your best advice for someone like me who I took Python in college and that's all I know, and now I've got AI to kind of say, well, I can make it for you, and I can kind of go and tweak it. I can change colors and whatnot.
Sure.
But what's my do I need to have like a certain stacks, like a codex? Like what's my future in this as a solopreneur?
Sure. Yeah, great question. As an individual, I'll take the scope where at the most you might occasionally rent a small team of developers to help you, and less than that. You're probably not going to have a full-time team of developers until you get to some other scale, right? So we'll go less than some borrowed talent. Writing stuff yourself, you get better at writing the Python yourself, or you're getting it from Claude or ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot or whatever. Things that can apply to you, I'd have to kind of go down the list to sort of pick out the years and think of the things, but there is a combination of techniques that I call the free toolbox. It's 3 things. I think only 2 of them would apply to you if you don't have more than one person. Okay. Number 1, this is free, involves no technology. Throttle the amount of work in process that you have. If you have a development team with 9 people on it, and the day after your sprint planning meeting, everybody goes and grabs a ticket, so you got 9 tickets in flight, you're lighting money on fire. I know it sounds completely counterintuitive, and you're going to think, my job is to sabotage your organization. If your whip is half your team size, you will get more done. I know that sounds insane. I know it sounds insane, but it's absolutely true. One of the reasons, sorry, minor tangent, I will come back. The code review ping pong. Why do code reviews exist? Why do pull requests exist? Stop doing pull requests. Commit to trunk immediately. That's why you do TDD. If it passed the test, it commits to trunk. You only have one interesting version of your code, and you know that it works within minutes, right? That's where you want to be. Here's what happens now in most organizations. You write a piece of code, you need him to review it, or somebody to, so you put out a PR. Somebody can't get to that PR because they're working on their own thing, because you got 8 things in flight for 8 people, right? So when they become available, then they'll pick up your PR. Well, you're sitting there waiting for your code review, so you'll pick up another thing. Now you have more pieces of work in flight than you have people. So your reviewer is going through your pull request, they're doing your code review, they're going to send some information back to you. This game of ping pong happens over a day or 2 days. If you sat there and looked at the same line of code together, and you could be in California and they're in Poland or India in some cases, if the time works. It doesn't matter where you're at. If you look at that code together at the same time, you don't need the code review. You don't need the pull request. You commit to trunk immediately. You never keep branches open. You will get 10 times more work done, right? And managers will say, I can't afford to have 2 developers write 1 line of code. Well, right now you're affording to burn money by having your team multitasking, right? You're already paying for it just in ways that you don't see. Okay, things that an individual can do. You can't do cross-skilling, which is the most valuable thing. If you have a team of people, cross-skilling can mean pairing, mobbing, training, anything you do that breaks people's knowledge silos. Anything that breaks people's knowledge silos is useful to you, because every team has, every team has a skills profile, and it looks, okay, I'm just going to leave it like that. It looks something like this. They're great at SQL, but they don't know anything about Python, or vice versa. Your team's skills profile is the black line. It's the top level of everybody's skills. Who's done bar trivia, pub trivia? 5 people, you go, you drink beers, they ask questions. Every person at your table doesn't have to know cars, Star Trek, baseball. The only thing that matters is as each question comes up, someone on your team knows the answer. When you have 4 or 5 people writing 1 piece of code at the same time, you will increase every person's skills profile individually, You will get rid of your bus factor problem. You will get rid of team fragility. If somebody has to go on vacation for a month, it's no big deal because you're not going to lose out on those solo dependencies. That's not going to work for you as an individual. What you can do is throttle your work in process. If you're trying to do 6 different things, rank them by business value, do one of them until it's complete. The second is cutting batch sizes. Whatever that one thing is, now ask yourself, can I make this smaller? Can I deliver less of the functionality? Can I make a really small thing that I can sell to a customer now for $10, and then later I'll have the bigger thing that I can sell to them for $100, all right? So those 2 pieces of the free toolbox you can do. Throttle your work in progress, break your batch sizes down to the smallest unit that you possibly can. And if you get to the point that you get multiple developers working with you, it's absolutely more cost effective to have multiple developers work on the same thing at the same time. The code review ping pong, the pull request, which literally was invented because we're taking code from strangers that we don't trust. That's why we have pull requests. And now we're using it in an enterprise where the person sending you the code is Dave, who you go to lunch with every day, right? You trust Dave. All right, I think I did exhaust my time now. Thanks.